Yes.
Just start the live stream.
Stop shooting.
Yeah.
Now I just remember and see and looking straight. He's rang me about 5 minutes ago. He said he's just leaving Harvey. So he forgot it was on today when he rang me last night. They went playing James 33 in the submission. I said, mate, what time he's going to be here? You go, quick. For the forum, yeah. Lara managed to get a Zoom in?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Everything else is working.
So we've got these three and Lara. Before I start, who's the opening karakia? You got it? You're nodding, okay. Nice deflection. Yeah, thank you. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Wastewater Management Review Committee meeting for Wednesday, 11 October 2023. So, although I'm the Deputy Chair, Lara has asked me to chair today's meeting. And before I go any further then, chat. Kia ora tātou, tātou ko huitahi nei tēnei ahiahi, kia koutou rā I ngā maungai kōru, tēnā o ngā iwi o ngā hapū, huri ake rā, o taranga mona tēnā koutou. Me ki rā I ngā kaimahi ngā āpia, e huitahi nei, o rea tēnā koutou. Just want to acknowledge today's meeting and the representatives from our various iwi and our staff here present to support this meeting. So I'll just open with a short karakia. O reira kia nui tātou. E te atua anei rā tātou e huitahi nei, ka tuku rā ngā whakamoemeti ngā whakawhetai ki a koe. Toro mai rā tōringa kaha ki ngā ia mātou hei āwhina hei tō nei ia mātou roto I nei mai. O reira te atua tēnei mā tēnei ki a koe, kōrero ki tōna taku āmini. Just before we start, I'm the alternate Stephen's online and Bill's here. I'm just sitting at the table to hear the discussion.
I was also going to afford you, if you wanted to speak, Shad, but obviously you can't vote because I've afforded speaking rights to other parties over the period that have been involved with the wastewater management. So yeah, feel free in terms of questions or commentary. Okay, so in terms of online, so we've got Destiny and Lara. If you guys could just turn your cameras on, given you're part of the committee, that would be great. And in terms of apologies for lateness. Okay.
Nick Hansen.
There's and Nick. I'm happy to move receipt of those apologies. Spencer, second. I'll put that. All those in favour, against, carried. There's no public forum. We don't have any late items. There's no confidential business. So there's nothing to transfer into open, and there's no proposed change to the order of business. So that takes us to item 7, the confirmation of the minutes of our last meeting on the 31st of May 2023. I can have someone who is here move and second those. Moved by Fitty. I'm quite happy to second those. Before I put them, are there any matters requiring clarification in terms of those minutes? Don't appear to be. So I'll put receipt of those minutes. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, are there any declarations of interest in terms of matters on the agenda? Appear to be any. Okay, so we'll get down to item 9, the wastewater program business case. Jane, welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just wanted to run you through the paper that you have in front of you regarding the wastewater program business case. The report basically provides an update on where we are at in terms of the business case since the last meeting of the committee on the 31st of May 2023. We have a number of recommendations that we make through the that we're seeking through the report, which I will go through. Basically, at that 31st of May meeting, there were a number of recommendations that staff made and some endorsements that staff sought on the work that had been done through the program business case to date. We were asked, those recommendations were not endorsed, and we were asked as a project team to go back and discuss and try and seek some resolution on those matters. We have, as a project team, staff and tangata whenua committee members have subsequently met on, I think it was the 13th of September, and discussed a range of matters, including additional matters, in response to a report that was provided by tangata whenua. This report goes through each of those matters and outlines the approach that was agreed in that September meeting. And we put those to the committee today for discussion and consideration. I guess the first key outcome of that September meeting was that all project reporting for the PBC to the committee would be joint and would represent the views of tangata whenua and staff. And that was, everybody was happy with that. We unanimously agreed with that. The second matter was regarding what was previously called cultural redress, and I take you to item number 12 on page 3 of the report. The tangata whenua paper clearly set out that cultural redress was an inappropriate term, and that KSR did not should not be labelled that. And there is discussion there to indicate that the paper indicates that the meaning should it should be taken that the program business case would not mean that tangata whenua could not pursue aspirations in terms of tangata whenua's vision to have land at Te Manga returned. So there is discussion in the paper around that, and there is some the rewording of that KSR and the minimum and scope, maximum aspirational scope levels listed as well. So yes, the amended wording we are proposing is promote opportunities for strong and enduring partnerships with tangata whenua and incorporates that previous KSR, which was previously about cultural redress. The next discussion point was KSR 11, which was seeking to avoid direct weather wastewater overflows to Y receiving environments. We have reached an agreed action there to amend the wording of that to actively seek practicable alternative options to the 2 consented overflows from the wastewater treatment plants. There was recognition there that KSR should more specifically focus on the emergency overflows from the 2 treatment plants. So the KSR and the metric there has been reworded to reflect that the scope levels remain unchanged. There was discussion and around the introduction of a long list assessment criteria, which would be a new critical success factor 17, must not disturb additional urapa or wahitapu sites. There was agreement in principle, I guess, that a new CFS must not disturb additional urapa or wahitapu sites should be added. However, staff would still seek further clarification from tangata whenua on the wording, particularly of disturb and additional, and that the final wording is to be agreed once that clarification has been provided. So in principle, yes, understand and agree with the intent, but there is some further discussion that the project team needs to have to cement that. Yes, happy to take any comments on my summary here, if there's anything that you wish to add.
Can I raise one question now? Doesn't work. Thank you. So just in terms of the reference to additional, can I take it to mean then that where we have the current outfall going through the Popmore number 2 block or the residue block, so that's kind of differentiating between that block and any other works that might happen in the future, so saying we won't disturb others, but because we've already got a pipe through that one, that's in a different category. Is that fair?
That's thanks for the question. That's the part that I'm not sure on, because the interpretation of the word additional could be anything new, like a new site. We don't want to. but it could also mean further disturbance to an existing site. And if we are putting another pipe beside an existing pipe, is that additional disturbance? So I guess we just want to understand. I think we understand the intent. We just want to get below the words so that we've got real clarity and we have a common understanding of things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next matter that was raised in the paper was to include long list assessment criteria on Hapu and iwi management plans. And staff were asked to consider whether they should be included as a CSF within the long list assessment criteria. And yeah, there was general agreement that that should happen, so that we're recommending the inclusion there. Next one was at point 19. So the critical success factor 10 must not discharge treated wastewater directly to natural wetlands, groundwater, rivers, lakes and streams was the previous wording that we had. The paper requested a desire for that to be more generally expressed as must not discharge wastewater directly to natural freshwater receiving environments, and we agree with that. We're happy with that change. So we're proposing a new wording: must not discharge directly to natural freshwater receiving environments. There was quite a clear. There was a lot of discussion around that does not encompass, obviously, direct discharges to seawater, being that they're not natural freshwater systems, but that Tangatapuna does express a strong desire for that to be phased out. Right. So in that regard, there was an amendment to KSR 12 to actively seek practicable alternative options to the discharge of wastewater to seawater, and the metric and scope levels for that are provided in draft below and will be confirmed by the project team. Okay. So yes, the PBC will actively seek practicable alternative options to the discharge of wastewater to seawater. That will be done sort of through the process of long listing to short listing, looking at alternative options. There was a desire in the paper to look at the separation of mortuary waste in the wastewater stream, and so there's general agreement to that the wastewater management review committee should, as within the scope of their terms of reference, request that staff undertake an investigation and report back on the sort of feasibility and possibility of that. There was some discussion in the Tangatapuna paper about geographical scope, and that Tangatapuna do not support increasing the geographical scope beyond where the Tamanga wastewater treatment plant already takes wastewater from. And staff in the September hui clarified that the scope levels set out in the PBC relate to servicing and not how the servicing takes place. So simply that the minimum, the next level and the aspirational maximum, it's looking at servicing in some way. It does not automatically infer that servicing will be by the Tamanga wastewater treatment plant. And the last matter that was discussed was the terms of reference. There has been a draft terms of reference that has been prepared for the wastewater program business case, and that has been circulated to everybody. I think it was back in about June. There was recognition that terms of reference hasn't been discussed in any length as a project team, and that needs to occur. And we've put an indicative signalled that we would look to come back with a sort of an agreed terms of reference within 1 month from this meeting. So yes, that really sets out all of the matters and the where the group has landed after that September hui. If anyone else has got anything to add to that, or then by all means, thank you.
Thanks, Jane. And so just following on from that, just providing opportunity now for any of the tangata whenua members to make any comments in terms of the general comments in terms of the report and what Jane has outlined. And after that, I'd like to then have a list of specific matters or issues that we will then work through. So just provide the opportunity for any general comments to add to what Jane has outlined and what generally is in the report. Noting we'll come back to the specific actions, agreed actions, or where there is a difference in a moment. Okay, no questions or comments online. Okay, so what I was then proposing to do, and I've got 3 on my list here, but we'll develop a list then in terms of specific matters that this committee can then discuss and see where we land. Prior to that, I would just like to acknowledge the work, though, of the project team post our May meeting, and for want of a better word, the committee sending the project team away in terms of looking at the range of issues that we had wanted some further advice and input on. And obviously with this report, and just like to acknowledge that work that has gone into in terms of working through each of those matters, and for a number of them reaching agreement. That certainly makes the focus and the discussion of this committee more streamlined in terms of, I wasn't intending we'd spend a lot of time on those matters that are agreed, but really focusing on those outstanding matters that either aren't agreed or where various members of the committee may wish to get some further clarification, as for example Spencer has earlier on his question. So then in terms of that, I have on my list so far is a discussion around KSR 6 in terms of not just the amended wording, but also a discussion around the minimum and maximum scope levels. CSF 17, in which Spencer has picked up again clarification around that. CSF 10, and just seeking some further clarity around, particularly around the word directly in respect of that. So those were 3 matters. So I'm just opening it up for members to highlight any other matters for a discussion by the committee in addition to those 3. Okay.
Chair, Stephen here.
Stephen.
Those were the 3 issues that I wanted to have discussion on as well. I don't have any others in addition to that, but would agree with you entirely in terms of your sentiments around the work of the project team to come to reconciliation on a range of matters already. I think that's been the ideal process, and it was certainly great to have the opportunity to read the tangata whenua response to the report, which in terms of process gives a real balanced view of the matters we're just about to discuss, I suspect. But those are certainly the primary issues from my point of view. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Stephen. Any further additional matters before we work through those three? Okay, there don't appear to be. So if we start off with KSR 6, Stephen, would you like to outline those matters that you'd like discussed and are of potential concern to you in terms of that?
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, look, I have no concerns about the essence of KSR 6, which is promoting opportunities for strong and enduring partnerships with tangata whenua. And in fact, I think the establishment of the project team and the way it's operating is a clear demonstration of that. Where I'm having some difficulty, though, is in the minimum and maximum aspirational scope levels. And I recognise and certainly acknowledge tangata whenua vision, and in particular around Te Maunga Wastewater Infrastructure Plant, and the desire that, as I understand it, that the plant at some time in the future no longer be required at that location, and that the land might be returned. So I think that's acknowledging and understanding that, I think, is an important component of how we consider and should be an input into the program business case. Where I have some difficulty, though, is in practically supporting the vision, given that the plant already is in place, is likely to continue to be a centrepiece of our wastewater management for some time. And it's likely, therefore, to require investment as part of the development of the system. To support the vision of restoration of the whenua, does that mean, certainly the implication I take from that is that any further investment in that plant would not be supportive of that vision, and so therefore could not be supported. And that does worry me, because the implications of that in terms of the system, its operation, and the affordability of alternative solutions, etc., to the whole Taronga community, including tangata whenua, would be quite significant, I think. And so it worries me that even the minimum, let alone the maximum, which supports the vision of return of the whenua, whilst I think conceptually desirable, practicably and from an affordability point of view, given where we are now with the plant in existence at that place, just becomes too challenging. And of course, part of our responsibility is being cognizant of the costs of such a significant change of that, and particularly when we don't know what sort of time frame we're talking about. So I have some difficulty with that. I would like to hear the views of tangata whenua on that matter. But for me, I would have difficulty supporting the recommendation as it stands.
Thanks, Stephen. Can I just clarify, Stephen, are you saying that perhaps this one is what you'd consider more of an intermediate level, and then there needs to be a replacement minimum that has something else? Or do you think that the how it's phrased at the minute is impracticable, whether it's critical or desirable?
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. I think the way it's, to me, as I understand it, the way it's phrased at the moment would be impracticable. I would suggest that wording like the vision for the restoration of whenua, Wai and Taio be acknowledged. I'd certainly be comfortable with wording along those lines, but supported, I think, to me implies that you really couldn't invest any further in that plant because it would be contrary to the vision. So I would be happy if others were to change the wording to suggest acknowledgement of that vision, but supporting, I think, just becomes unpracticable. If that helps, Spencer.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose just one response I have immediately is, I guess restoration. When I read it, my first reading of it was that I got there. It is quite a broad statement around the restoration of Whenua and Taiao, which actually is not limited to that site. So I would be slightly concerned if that was watered down because, for example, I mean, the outfall goes out into the seaward side of town. There are issues in terms of the seepage through into Rangataua. So I think that maybe what it needs actually is just a bit more of the nuance to be played out a bit more in the detail. So, I mean, I think we can have a look at how you'd word it to cover off those issues, but I'm not sure that I'm ready just to relinquish that the restoration being a critical objective, because it is just broader than the site. So perhaps there's a way to manage both of those issues.
Stephen, did you have any particular response at this time?
Yeah, I was just trying to think how we might do that. The second part of that clause, giving special regard to the impact of Tamonga, if we were to delete that, but then it becomes quite broad then. And maybe, Spencer, we need to be more specific about those visions where restoration might be practicable.
Yeah, perhaps I must admit I thought, I think that's okay, so I moved on. I hadn't thought about it deeply enough before the meeting, but yeah, I do suspect there is a way to word it where it covers off all of the issues, and perhaps there might be also a use of the intermediate scope level as well, that might be tied into this, but I don't know how far I can take it right at this meeting, other than that, because I'm just really thinking about it on the hoof.
Yeah, and I think as part of the from today, there might be some matters where some further thinking and consideration is given, and then coming back and consideration by the project team, and then coming back to the review committee. So there's always the danger of trying to do all of the wordsmithing at a meeting by a committee. So I think it's important to get what the issues and concerns on the table, and then some further work can be undertaken around those. Fitty.
Yeah, kia ora. The bid and return, I think there's two levels to that. The first one was is our I'll say frustration about the pond one and its return and stuff like that. So we're just blocking holes there. And the second one is that we're thinking with technology improvements over time, 150 years, it might be defunct, it mightn't be, the plant there mightn't be viable anymore. And so, we're thinking about, straight away return back to Mount again. That's the essence there. I'm thinking about, when we talk about visions for the restoration and return. There are two levels with that return. Like I said, there's frustration from us as tangata whenua members about the decommissioning of Pond 1 and what that actually means, decommissioning it to us from day dot. It meant no more, it's going to be handed back. So, it was, like I said, two levels there, bit of frustration, making sure that, like I said, we're blocking the holes. And the other one, especially for me anyway, like I said, 100, 150 years down the track, that plant might be totally obsolete, and we expect that people to be handed back to Ngāwhiti.
Well, I think Fitty, and that raises a good point in terms of some of that further discussion around and whether there is need for some further wording or description of what some of the terms mean and what the expectations are, perhaps over a period of time. So I think that just gives life to actually it's an issue on the table and then some further teasing out of those matters. And picking up in particular that wording and return is because probably from my point of view, and I'd probably bravely speak on behalf of my colleagues, whether or not that's more of an organisation discussion or Crown as opposed to around this particular table. So I think that's another matter that would need to be teased out and thought about in terms of any reframing of and rework of KSR 6. Des.
Sure, apologies. I stuck up for Tāne Wainuku with 92 tamariki from the wharekura. It was a long one. Anyway, yeah, I'm thinking in a realm of the consenting, which has given this ability to operate this wastewater operation. And in my mind, we got to avoid, remedy, mitigate. There's the weird mitigation committee. All this is about remediation. The other matter is tenureship. It's around the management of that. And I think steps to in the decision making, I feel is that we can't lose sight of that remediation and then bulk on who's going to get it back and other type of because we have I tell you, just with my experience with surplus land, council's lands for disposals, we don't have very good record as a council on that. So but we do have a good record with council and my own personal experience with remediation. And I think it does need to be teased out because things need to be done now there in terms of the remediation, telling whānau that they're just removing the sludge for decommissioning is not enough in terms of that aspiration longer term. And you got to think of it as that even though the mayor at the time said he'll drink the water after the process and didn't, is that we lost a huge connection as a whānau as we used to gather. Many marae would gather in whānau on the harbour side from this area, and we've lost a lot of, it's alienated a lot of, just like other infrastructure has alienated us from our usual business activities and well, not business activity, well they were. Instead of going to the shopping market, we'll go down to the town. And this is what our kaumātua and that were fearful of the time. And we face these struggles. We can't develop our land out there. We got the sewage there, and then a lot of those farmers are not even connected. So when we talk about this some of those free waters and the water service entity requirements. I think when you map that out, it'll even demonstrate that something needs to be done, because the communities out there, our hapu, marae, especially Ngā Pōtiki, have had to endure that for 1, 2, 3, going into 3 generations now. I don't think it's acceptable. I'm more on this side, and you know, I don't know what it's like day to day. Though what I hear and from others is that it's caused in the amongst of growth, especially for Ngā Pōtiki, it's caused them to really invest in alternative methods of dealing with their own waste, and hence they've put a big commitment into you know, having their own offline system. So that's got to say with terms of the level of commitment from the tangata whenua there, and taking this matter quite seriously. I'd just like to reiterate that steps to remediation need to worked on and fleshed out, especially if we're looking at the scope levels around these timeframes and level of commitment around what's critical and aspirational. Because I'm thinking we're not even meeting our obligations under the current resource consent, really. When we look at avoid, remedy and mitigate as the committee, I think we could do more. That's a bit of a statement and a half. Ngāti rangi nui.
Thanks, Steve. Spencer.
Can I just add one more thing, but bearing in mind, obviously, I take your point that there clearly needs to be some more discussion on this. Just around that issue of the return of whenua, while I do have some attraction to the view that it's not for this committee and it is a discussion to have elsewhere, there is a connector to the work of this committee and the wastewater treatment plant and some other infrastructure issues. And by that I mean, obviously these lands, well, Tamonga lands, Tremont Lane, were acquired under the Public Works Act. So by and large, there's an ongoing obligation that lands ought to be returned once they're no longer used for the purpose for which they were taken. And so there may well be issues as to the extent of the wastewater treatment plant, firstly, and secondly, also what has become apparent to me in other meetings is often once these lands get taken, they're taken for one particular purpose. Generally, central and local government look at that as a broader purpose that they can just apply to the land. And I think if we're talking about a partnership there needs to be some discussion around how it is that those lands are available for return rather than just sitting there until such time as someone can think about an option for use of them for another public purpose. So anyway, I guess I'm just saying that there's clearly a point to be discussed there, and whether or not it's completely outside of the work of this committee or there is something that is retained here, I'm not entirely sure yet, but happy to have the conversation.
Thanks, Spencer. Any other comments on this particular matter?
Sorry, or any other comments on this particular matter? Because I'm as part of the further discussions, and I'm thinking aloud here, I suppose it's been clear on those matters that are clearly under the purview of the Wastewater Management Review Committee and what should be in the business case, but whether there is also some acknowledgement of other matters or issues that aren't part of, say, a KSR, but are noted and referenced and acknowledged for consideration in other forums or in other ways. So I'm just putting that on the table is for part of the consideration of the project team. And I suppose in part it's picking up a bit of what's been said, and also in particular what Spencer's outlined in terms of some connection somewhere, but where the focus might be for some of those matters in a different forum or in different arrangements. So I'm just then suggesting the project team could actually think about that and then come back with some suggestions. Yes.
Yeah, well, bearing that in mind around the tenureship and sub or ownership is that we need to look after it. It was taken in a quite a good state, and we need to remediate it to that. So irrespective of that, we still need to be working towards fixing it up, because we got, like I was saying, we got to meet our current management responsibilities, so that when it is time to, that it lines up with that, because like I don't want to go too much into other areas of grievances and lands returned matters, but just to do with the current operations around remediation, I think there needs to be a stronger emphasis put into the immediate term around this. And I would share in the vision that when it comes back, that it comes back like in a safe environment, because I've worked on there and I've seen some things that really need to be remediated on that site. There's been some stuff that hasn't been done very nice to their whenua, and there actually needs to be a lot of tangata whenua involvement in that remediation. So it's a big, when you talk about whenua, it's a connection. So it's more than just these transactional elements, which are very important. And I think we really need to address taking care of that in view that when it's passed on, that it's passed on in the same or better state for our uri, for the future who would manage and future people of the area. Tangata whenua. I think they'll appreciate that this committee is in this business case putting steps towards remediating that land.
Thanks, Des. The other comment I'd like to add is in terms of when the team looks at it, whether there are some intermediate scope levels also. So on the way back, I'm not professing to know what those might be, but really inviting the project team to give that also some consideration.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to because I've worked on there are some places that don't feel very safe and that are not right, and I wouldn't want anyone to be able to come across these in the future. And I'm involved in another council project where they've treated our whenua not so good, and it was taken for water main. It is treated as a dump site, and this is what I'm and now that's pretty much our job, was cleaning up the mess. And I don't want it to be like that, in years to come, because it's not a nice job to do.
No.
Chair, just in terms of thinking about this, I certainly am of the view that where we're talking about restoration of environmentally unsound and unsafe realities that exist at the moment, I'm 100% in supporting Tangata Whenua's vision on that. It's my vision as well, and I think it would be the vision of the committee. It's when it goes then to the next step of supporting decisions or measures that would then make the operation, say, of Te Maunga or our other plants unviable, such that we would have major alternative investment, or that would follow from that. That's where I'm having the difficulty. So that if Des and co were able to identify particular issues that needed to be addressed, then they could be the minimum or intermediate targets depending on the significance of them. The issues around restoration of land, I think, are outside the scope of this committee. They are wider issues. They're issues for the Crown, etc. So I don't see that as part of the business case, and that's why, and the return creates some difficulty. So I think your suggestion of acknowledging that vision of tangata whenua, but that there would be other processes that would deal with those issues would be the appropriate way to deal with that. I just make those comments as an input to the project group when they are having the conversation about how we might address the wording of this particular section.
Stephen, just a clarification in terms of you talk about the restoration of land, you were using that in the context presumably of the return as opposed to improving or remediating the land. I just wanted to clarify the context you were using that in.
Yeah, so restoration of the land to tangata whenua, I think, is beyond the scope. But what is within the scope is restoration of environmentally unacceptable processes that would be within the scope, and we could perhaps identify those as the minimum or interim steps that would satisfy the KSR of working in partnership with tangata whenua.
Okay, no, thanks for that.
Before any final comments, because I think there's been a number of matters on the table for the project in consideration. Jane, do you have any comment at this point in terms of what's on the table and in terms of the proposed process?
No, I think we've got a fair.
You press the button.
Sorry. No, I think we've got a fair understanding of where the discussion needs to go in terms of in terms of that item.
Okay. Okay, if there's nothing further on KSR 6. Oh, sorry.
Well, yes. If there's nothing further on KSR 6, I was just going to then move to CSF 17. And this had been, I think Spencer had touched on this previously, and it's noted in the report around the uncertainty around the wording of disturb and additional, and then wording to be agreed once clarification received by the project team. So we can just go back to that, Jane, in terms of particularly what you're seeking around that. Or Wally?
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's the clarity of the wording. When the project team was having the discussion around the interpretation of additional or disturb, we were asking questions like, okay, so where are sites of Waihi Tapu, and can we geographically place them so that we'd understand where they are, and then we could, and that's quite difficult, and that they can be quite wide areas. So it's hard for us to know in advance where we might be having an impact, what level of additional impact is acceptable, and what level of disturb, or how far does disturb go or not go. So really we just need to have a few more discussions around those words and have clarity so that everyone on the project team has common understanding.
Okay. Thanks.
Wally Fitty.
Yeah, well, one of those would be if we are talking about the future path of the infrastructure, and I did say the new path, or the path of the infrastructure is definitely going to go past another urupa or cemetery somewhere along the way. I mean, if we're going to go out to Tumu Way and taking infrastructure out there, there's urupa and Waihi Tapu out there. that it'll encroach upon, saying back towards going Tauriko and all that. There's additional Waihi Tapu and Urupa, and I think that is a sort of a protection measure for us, just to make sure that we, as we're developing a path of the infrastructure, we can see Urupa coming up and maybe able to veer it off somewhere, just thinking out loud.
Thanks for the, yes,
I think it's inherently cultural heritage planning problem that we have in the city. And that's, you go through the motions of getting these things on promulgated draft plans and they get removed, going through this public notification process. And I can say that a number of sites that we achieved to identify get removed through the process, and that's a huge problem. So we can lock them in terms of identification, but the verification process of those can be intrusive if there's a requested archaeological authority to investigate, and you've got private landowner kind of permission too. Because I've been up to, we've got Pukeputo, and just last week, because council have removed it from the promulgated draft plan, site M54, Waitiahi, never made it on to the finalised plan. It's even though the developer knew it was there, council just went up there and put the digger through, just last week, and because it's not on their plan anymore. So it's there, things are real, sites, still visible sites are there. It happens quite often. And I'm kind of struggling to see why this is here and it's not better understood when we're looking into how the linkages are within the system around the identification of that. It's not that we're not willing to share and uphold the information. It's whether the process allows us to effectively provide this mechanism so they are not disturbed. We just look at the current plan change 33 and what I've had to make a response with regards to that. No expert witnesses looked at the any cultural aspects to it, but cultural view shafts and enabling underutilization or enabling Māori land. There are no experts around that, and quite an important process for us around the intensification. So all that's going to lead to is more disturbance. Like I can just so I think this needs to, if we're looking at that and we're looking at the identification of sites, section 6E RMA, we may have to look under the new legislation too around that, and look at ways around how they look at the fourth schedule, parts 1 and 2 around cultural redress, spelt out there, offset compensation to support the effects-based void remedy mitigation approach to addressing environmental effects. So I think that that a lot of this would rely on planning expertise in terms of the mechanism to actually make it work. And we need some cultural policy analyst or something. Council needs some. We were talking about it the other day. To talk amongst you, so when they present their reports, they're not misrepresenting the information, or it's more well put out to the decision makers if they've got that steering guidance in the house.
So just taking that a bit further, Dennis, is that, in your view, a need somewhere in terms of, notwithstanding the any identification in the district plan, or indeed the lack of it through the RMA process, the need for the identification of Urupa and Wahitapu sites on some type of plan. So when the infrastructure planning is undertaken, it's those clearly identified, whatever that might be.
What do you get? Like the big generic stormwater area, they're doing all these inventories, but the cultural inventory is just as important. It's upheld just as significantly in the legislation as the wetlands are. So I think we need better information around, what I'm trying to say here is mainly is that there's too many loopholes in the process, in the planning process, that when trying to achieve this, that needs to be addressed. Because I think there needs to be more investment around the wording, so the policy work, and more investment in the actual researching. And because we're losing, if you just look at all the go to HPT, so Heritage New Zealand, you ask for the records, we're losing quite a few sites, and there's been no redress for this. And it could be all, if that was to, if there was a hard pressing issue where they had to destroy and or modify, then you've taken it right to the last minute, and you have the ability to look at other planning instruments to address disturbance. At the moment, it's kind of just dealt with as it comes, and pretty much let's put a digger in there, put some fellas to keep an eye out and see what we can find. And like I said, I don't think it's enough. There's not enough investment into that inventory assessment work to be able to safely guarantee to the likes of the project managers that it's going to be okay. And I know that in Te Manga, as it is with their pipeline where it is, it should be, and it is a priority, one of the KSRs, as the primary example for the business case.
Given what you have outlined, I just wonder though whether some of this is wider than the current business case in terms of wastewater from an overall organisational council perspective, as opposed to just looking at it in a more narrow way from just the wastewater perspective. But a shared, you want to do into that?
Yeah. I kind of understand the principle behind the KSF, which is to avoid and protect urupa, and in particular where they are known. If at some point in the future council decides to put in a new pipe somewhere else, or there's another scheme further down the coast, I'm sure there would be a lot of assessment work that would need to go into that to understand the particular route. And if there are known sites, then they should be avoided. So I think the principle of avoiding, or particularly knowing, it is a challenge when we don't know where some of these things are. And it's really up to Tangata Whenua to disclose where they can and where they're comfortable about where some of these places are. But I do take the point in the critical success factor to not disturb these particular places. But I suppose, going back to Wally's point, and also to Spencer, it's making sure that it's clear about what we mean in this particular section.
Jane, in terms of the discussion to date on this, do you think there's enough then for the project team to talk this through further And in terms of some of that, sorry, and achieving some of that.
Yes, certainly, as the report indicates, that was our proposed approach with that one, is just to discuss further as a project team, and try and sort of get clarification on those aspects so that we can all be clear what we mean by it, what's okay and what's not.
Share.
Sorry, but I do want to acknowledge Des and Des Porterville about cultural heritage and about how we protect and look after it, because it is, well, from my perspective and your perspective, is how do we protect and look after those things. We did put our city plan on hold. I do know we've got reports coming around priority plan changes, so there may be opportunity to feed in work around cultural heritage. So just kind of want to put that on your radar.
Yeah, I mean, and with us at Tangata Whenua, I mean, this is an important taki here, and we've got to get our heads around exposing where our sites are, I suppose, because we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because we were let out where sites are, they've been degraded and stuff like that, and then so it gets harder and harder to disclose where sites are. But it's a job for people like myself to talk our hapu, and to bring up the conversation and try and get them comfortable with letting you know where wahi tapu sites are and that. That's going to be an ongoing discussion amongst whānau and hapu all the time. But like I said, it's up to the likes of us up here and some of the kaumātua to address it, because it can only help the city and us in the end if we, that's my personal opinion, if we disclose all our sites. Sure.
I'd just like to add that there's already been some disclosure in the promulgated draft plan, but subsequently about 80% of those sites are removed, but they still sit on the council file public. And if you just start by putting those back on, well, I've actually seen quite a few of them being, I told you they were there, not exactly there, but in the vicinity, gone now. And if the developer said, if I would have known, I wouldn't have had a big fallout with the bulk earthworks contracting, because it slows everything down. If those preliminary works haven't been done, and it's the same again with infrastructure, especially dealing with wastewater, people a bit, whānau would be a bit, because you bring another element of wastewater if it's significant. So that's kind of another level of assessment too. Yeah, of disturbance.
And I think hence my comment that this is a matter that's wider than just the wastewater business case. And part of it seems to be also, and how, to be frank, this organisation might work through and consider and deal with and plan regarding cultural heritage matters. So that's why I think it's that wider organisational consideration in addition to the more focused wastewater.
Stephen.
Sorry, Chair, I was just wondering whether, as guidance to the team, wording something like take practicable steps to not disturb additional urupā or waihi tapu sites where they are known might be a way forward.
And then
perhaps adding to some of the discussion or notation in the business case or wherever, the potential need for the organisation to look at it from a more holistic point of view, in addition from in addition to just the wastewater business case. Spencer.
I think there were three issues there. There is that broader cultural heritage, which I won't add my 10 cents worth into in this forum. There's future works that may impact on other wāhi tapu or urupa, which of course we don't know at this stage, but I think I agree with Shadrach that it's an important principle that those things are to be avoided rather than take practicable steps. I think that's watering it down a bit too much for my liking. But I think there is a third issue, which is in relation to the pipe that's already existing and future potential upgrades, additions, whatever they are to that. And I think that probably needs some specific wording on its own because it's already running through an urupa already. And I don't know whether there are any others that are impacted, but that, of course, being here on behalf of Ngā Pōtiki, that's the one I'm particularly concerned with. So I do think perhaps that needs to be treated on its own. Then there's this issue of the principle of avoiding future ones. And yeah, then there's the cultural heritage stuff for another day at another space.
Thanks, Spencer. And I think that's probably a good summary in terms of, for want of a better word, sort of segmenting in terms of that focus from the particular through to the more general. Okay.
Sorry, just it would be useful to understand, picking up Spencer's point about the current pipe. And particularly from a Ngā Pōtiki perspective, the pipe's already there. And, when the pipe went in, it's probably massive trenching that went through that urupa to lay the pipe. And whether there's any, so at some point, if the pipe needs to be upgraded or replaced, whether not trenching, but directional drilling, which will be a lot deeper than probably what the pipe is now, whether technology provides for those kinds of opportunities, given that there is still a urupa above. So it'd be useful, I think, for them to have that conversation about the use of technology to avoid. Is it still avoiding if you're going 10, 20 metres below an existing urupa? Would be useful to kind of get that feedback, I think.
Anything further at this point on CSF 17? Jane or Wally, anything before we move on to the next one?
Sorry, said a little
Yes.
bit on maybe when they are existing, there needs to be some management structure around that. We got an issue, another one, but it's gone, and it's blue and it's scoured out the side of the park site, which is a cemetery, where you're going to have ongoing management issues because of this infrastructure. This is another one. There's going to be ongoing management issues. I think you need these opportunities to develop a specific plan, to address what is known now and what the current operations are. That could help in the segmented approach to the. And I agree with Spencer. I just want to reiterate that the word avoid is just when you're dealing with the nature of that, it's probably the best word to put forward. Yeah, because otherwise we especially with wāhi tapu urupa, it's just like to support that.
Okay, well, there's a number of matters there.
For the project team to have a look at, and also including what Des has just outlined in terms of any potential subsequent management arrangements. Okay, so going to the third matter, and this relates to CSF 10. Must not discharge wastewater directly to natural Des, could you just, thanks, must not discharge wastewater directly to natural freshwater receiving environments. And I suppose some consideration and discussion around what directly means. And when I first read that, I assumed that there'd be no pipes, for example, to putting wastewater into the natural freshwater. Or does it mean more than that in terms of potential seepage or whatever else? So I think some further discussion around that. Obviously, any thinking today, but further discussion by the project team in terms of exactly what that means. So I'll open it up for any comments or around that. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just picking up on this point. Where it talks about natural wetlands, we do have a constructed wetland over at Manga. So how does that kind of factor in here? So still using natural processes to resolve and deal with the discharge, but essentially it is a constructed wetland to try and manage that. So.
I was just gonna ask what the answer to all that is.
Jane, any commentary?
Right. We understand that there, that Ngā is still seeking direction, or needs to seek direction on whether that constructed wetland does provide sort of that cultural treatment, I guess. That was what was advised to us, and that I guess more generally we need to have sort of a shared understanding as to what good looks like and what is not good, and that needs to be done in terms of the PBC by the assessment stage, so that we can adequately appropriately assess different responses as to whether they are good or not good in that regard. Yeah, so we understand that that is still outstanding, and that will come back to us in due course.
Take us with what your view is on the first one, which is what's meant by direct.
To a natural freshwater receiving environment, that would be to our stream, river, lake. Just trying to think of other freshwater bodies. So body of water. We will see groundwater differently. If we were looking at a land-based disposal system, the water would typically percolate through that land and end up in a groundwater system. So, and that's not directly, it's passed through Papanuku to get to that water body. Likewise, with our current discharge, it flows through two constructed wetlands. And when we consulted with iwi and Hapu back in the early 90s for the construction of that plant, that was seen as culturally acceptable at that time. Now times have moved on, perhaps that is not seen in the same light now. I don't know. That is something that we would be seeking clarity on. And it may be that, oh no, I'm thinking outside the square. It may be that those wetlands could be acceptable if they were modified or changed slightly to be more of a treatment facility rather than the habitat wetlands that they are at the moment. So there might be opportunities for them to be constructed slightly differently or modified so that we get more benefit out of them as far as the treatment and environmental, treatment device goes. I'm just throwing that out there. So at the moment, they are a habitat wetland more than a treatment wetland.
But it,
It was, our kaumātua of the day back then, I think it was, Uncle Bill and Uncle Curry and it was for treatment, not really for the park itself, you know, so, I'm looking for ways for it to be treated, because, that's the last bit of treatment that'll sort of go through before it goes to the, outfall lake. And that's initially and, essentially what we'd asked, why the old guys had asked for it to be formed like that, treatment. And if you can make it a better treatment pond, all the better.
Yes.
Yeah, my understanding was it was a tertiary treatment for both our treatment stations at Chapel Street and the proposed one there. And things have, since the Southern Pipeline, the scopes changed. Like it's become, Te Manga was built for the Mount Papamoa and Chapel was for Tauranga. And now these two systems are for Tauranga and others. And I don't know where the level of treatment has been monitored over the years to still cope for that expansion, what's coming in with our current outputs with regards to the wire receiving, being able to take that. Everything's got a threshold, but without that, that's kind of a bit of an unknown as well around trying to avoid these discharges, because when our system, the resilience of our system shows that not just out of the Te Manga scenario, but out there on the network scenario, that we have these spillages and breakages, and that requires another level of thought, discussion and assessment. So there's like a carrying capacity issue, and then there's a what if contingency issue. And I think the design parameters have changed because of the Southern Pipeline and the Western Bay influence and the UFTI influence with these new unanticipated growth areas coming on into the what was, when that was planned, the anticipated areas. So yeah, that's going to add, while we're having this point of discussion, a real impact on the carrying capacity of, when we talk about treatment, and the loss of these freshwater environment through a result of these wet weather events.
Thanks, Des. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just, Dave said it, but when you're talking about direct link to natural, like you said, we're not exactly going to put a pipe directly to a natural thing. It's when overflows happen, like you see, and just the capacity of plant and wet weather events, because it will go directly to the Tahuna at the Mo and at Chapel Street out into the harbour. If it's overflow, wet weather, is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's what that's all about, really, is trying to avoid that. And that's what Des was talking about, the capacity of each plant to be able to handle wet weather events, so it doesn't overflow into the seawater or into any other freshwater environment.
Wally.
Yeah, I guess just to remind the committee that since those wetlands were constructed and the Southern Pipelines been put on, there has been an additional wetland put in. It was just wetlands A and B. We have constructed wetland C in accordance with that, and provide a lot more treatment and storage through the pond before it goes into wetland C. So it does receive a lot more treatment than it did back in the day, if you like, before these things happened. And yeah, we can talk about weather inflows another time, but we probably have the most watertight system in the country at the moment. And I know you're all aware of that. We've been through it several times. Yeah. But
Brian's here to talk about inflow.
oh, you're here to talk about. I think we have a separate item on inflow and infiltration, which Brian Everett's going to talk to the committee on. Shall we leave it for Brian? Where he can.
Okay, any further commentary at this point? But I think in just going back and picking up Wally's comment in terms of being also clear in terms of natural freshwater receiving environments, vis-a-vis groundwater and such as that. So again, clarity around those types of matters also. Nothing further on CSF 10? No? Not Des, you look poised there.
You're just thinking about, our stormwater assessments, looking at the recharge of surface water. Would disposal to land be seen in the same light as factoring that into surface water? Because we're factoring it into groundwater. And what I'm getting at is the municipal water supply take into account the rainwater and stormwater flows as recharged surface water tanks. It's really trying to get allocation for the rain, where the council don't allocate rain, but it's allocate surface water. But wouldn't you need to look at that aspect as well? And with regards to the water, not just going seepages into groundwater, would you look at the same into surface water?
Certainly. Certainly. Continues. So we are building a surface water, groundwater model and the interrelationships between the two, and starts right at the top of the catchment of Taranwanuku and further over towards the ranges towards the Rotorua side. And it looks at the way the water moves through those streams and also through the ground, coming all the way down here, and the extraction rates of water that we're taking, but also other users are taking through the Waiari, the Toto and Wairohi streams. So we're trying to get that water balance fully understood. We're doing that piece of work for renewing our consents for the water takes, but downstream of that, around Papamoa and Mount Wanganui, we also have groundwater bores measuring groundwater levels in real time, and we're plotting those. So we understand those we don't understand them yet. We're trying to understand the interrelationships of that water as it passes from the mountains through to the sea, both the surface and groundwater. But of course, there are a whole lot of abstraction points, and when we have big floods and big rains, well, that water just rushes through, as you know. That relationship between the groundwater changes. We're trying to understand that stuff. It's a joint piece of work with us, Western Bay and Regional Council.
See anything with the wastewater today?
Well, we're not applying wastewater to land at this point in time, so at this point in time, it's not considered.
Not considered yet.
Yep.
Okay, there's nothing further. That completes three matters in terms of providing some input for the project team to go away, work through, and then come back on those three particular matters. What I was going to suggest to the committee, though, is that obviously those three matters are set aside. There are a number of other recommendations there, including all those matters that have been agreed between the members of the project team. And I was going to suggest, if the members were happy, that we actually consider those recommendations, with the exception of
C2, and I'm on page 19, and C2 relates to KSR 6. The other exception and not considering is CF 17, which is Roman numeral C4, and also C6, which relates to CSF10. And then for today, deleting D and E. But in terms of all the other recommendations, was proposing that we consider and hopefully be able to resolve on those. That also has the advantage of that when the team come back, the focus is clearly on those three matters that we have talked today, and the reporting will only be on that, not on all of the other matters. So I was proposing that. So yeah, I'm happy to move that. Spencer seconding that. So, and being clear, that does not include C2, C4 and C6, nor does it include D or E, because they will come back in due course. Yes, yeah, clarity. So here is just the ones highlighted in the yellow are the matters that we aren't resolving on today. In the next page, there's those ones 4, 6, and D and E. So it excludes those. Those there. Yes.
Kia ora, I'd like to leave this to Destiny to at this stage and vacate our seat. I have to go.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's all.
That's fine.
Keep me in the end. We've had our discussion.
Can you wait 30 seconds, because if there's no further discussion, I was going to put those recommendations.
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, but she knows my position.
So I've moved it. Second by Spencer. Are there any further discussion on those recommendations? If there are not, I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. So thank you, and thanks for the discussion and contribution on those matters. And yes, thanks, Des. And noting that Destiny will be taking over as your alternate. Thank you. So that takes us to
Bill, just while there's a pause,
Sarah.
I will need to take my leave as well.
Okay.
School pickups in 12 minutes. I better get a wriggle on.
Okay. Okay, no, thanks, Lara.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're now on page 98 of the agenda, item 9.2, and it's the Wastewater Management Review Committee Activity Report. Jim, welcome. Thank you. Thanks, Joan. Over to you. We've got your report and any matters that you would like to highlight. Wally.
Thank you, Stu. Just by way of introduction, you probably know Jim is our consents officer, looking after consents. At the time, he's also acting as the wastewater services manager while Radley is overseas.
Thank you.
Well, kia ora, everyone. Is it possible to bring the presentation?
That's on. So I'll just give you a run through on the activities since the last committee.
You can just bring the microphone a bit closer, please.
Is that better?
Just pull the unit up.
Is that better? Cool, so let's start. So since the last committee meeting, in regards to the discharge consent at Tamanga, all the consent, all sampling has been within the consent limits. Not much to update on that one. So the seepage rates continue to be well within the consent conditions, even with the desludge program well underway. We've reduced the pond level to the minimum level that we can, and this would further reduce any seepage risk, which is working quite well. There's no other complaints that have been received for Chapel Street or Tamanga wastewater treatment plant since the last committee meeting. In terms of emergency overflow discharge consents, well, Chapel Street and Tamanga, there's been no discharges, which is great. In terms of wastewater overflows, since the last committee meeting in June 23, we've had 23 blockages that have been notified to council. 18 didn't leave the network and were contained to land. 2 discharged to the stormwater system and 3 potentially made the receiving environment. These were all notified to Bay of Plenty Regional Council, TITRF, and local iwi HAPU reps. Water quality sampling being undertaken as per our standard protocol and warning signs placed around relevant areas until the sampling shows that there was no further impact on the water quality. In terms of inflow infiltration, I won't provide much of a commentary because Brian Everett, our engineer, is going to give a presentation after myself and give an update on our TCC strategies and our next steps. Moving on to the Tamanga upgrades, the desludging of Pond 1 is well underway. So to date, we've moved over 6,000 dry tonnes since desludging began. Currently, the programme is well on schedule. I've just included a recent photo on the right, which shows you the top of Tip Lane, one of the sludge cells, which is where we're depositing the sludge from. So that was taken very recently. Since the last committee meeting, our contractor has moved to 24 hours of operation. This is to remove as much sludge as we can. 2 sludge cells have been filled and stabilised with sawdust. The regional council, they undertook a site inspection under the consent that we have for the desludging, and they were satisfied with the compliance. Moving on to other upgrades at Tamanga, Cry number 3. So the construction contract's been awarded to HEB and the construction's commenced. Current work's completed, so the topsoil has been stripped. We're established on site, shoot piles, and we've installed the dewatering system. The bulk excavation is due to commence in late September 2023. And our Podify has been commissioned as well to provide cultural monitoring during the excavation works. Moving on to Bioreactor 2, since the last committee meeting, construction of internal pile grids is complete. Piles have been tested and checked for compliance with the specification. Perimeter remedial works currently in the planning phase and expected to commence in early October 2023. Delays have occurred, pushing the completion of the ground improvement works to March 24. Balance of the contract for the above ground works is scheduled to commence in April 2024 and take around about 15 months to complete. The photo on the right shows the current site establishment and the drill rigs in operation. The landward section of the outfall is now complete since the last committee meeting.
Moving on to the marine section. So the marine outfall has been cleared of debris using our robot, which is showed here on the right. So we'll remove the pieces of grout, and we're also inspecting the line using CCTV. So the data is currently being assessed by consultants, and around about 6 to 9 weeks, we're expected to have some results. New works, looking at the new inlet works, the work has commenced on decommissioning the existing odor bed and replacing it with a new one with a smaller footprint. This is anticipated to be completed in the third quarter of 2024. Work is progressing with the assessment of the new inlet works and a few concept options we're looking at. Once it's cleared and is selected, we'll start to commence that. The preliminary design of the new inlet works will commence on the third quarter of 2024 after mechanical and supply contracts have been awarded. We're also looking at conduct a number of ground investigations for geotechnical, groundwater and environmental for the new bioreactor 3 and picket fence thickener 3. Moving on to the EMEF fund. So the next steps since the last committee meeting, next steps are the appointment panel to assess and appoint the independent panel members, which we've currently shortlisted. Once the panel's in place, the applications to the fund can open. And yeah, any questions on that?
Thanks, Jim. So I'll open it up for any questions or commentary around the table. I got one question, Jim, just in terms of that environmental mitigation and enhancement fund panel. So what's the time frame now? Because in terms of that process and getting to the stage where there is the consideration of applications, etc.
So earlier this year, Radley and myself interviewed a number of candidates that were selected as being adequately suitable to do the job. So they were interviewed, and we've got all of the 5 candidates. So we just need to sit down with the panel, and they make the final decision.
Okay.
So it's TCC's job to provide to recommend candidates. For the appointments, it's with the EMEF panel members.
No, just as an observation, be good to see all that progress, because presumably the fund continues to build up, and there have not been any applications granted, certainly since we as commissioners have been in place in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it's still accruing money every year, so couldn't give an exact figure on there, but I could find out. It's quite a lot in there.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Just
yeah, kind of.
But then,
yeah, just a question. I don't know whether it's obvious or not. 27 site investigations. I am presuming there'll be a cultural assessment in the site investigations as well, eh?
Yes, will be 15.
Yeah, I just that it wasn't noted in there, that's all.
okay, there's enough.
By now, okay.
Okay, Jim, did you want to?
Yeah, we can hand over to Brian Everett, who's going to give a presentation on the inflow and infiltration strategy.
Okay. Welcome, Brian.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Everett. I'm the team leader of engineering services in City Waters. And I'm going to be presenting on our management strategy for inflow and infiltration. The engineering services team provides mechanical and electrical maintenance services to City Waters, and we provide engineering service support in planning projects and operations, as well as asset management to the three activities.
And we haven't got your presentation on screen. Right?
Oh.
Sorry, it's just off the atom. Otherwise, our colleagues on the screen won't be able to see it. I probably hit the wrong button. Good to go.
Right, so the session outline briefly is I'll just touch on again to I don't know if everybody knows what inflow and infiltration is, so I'll just touch on that. I'll go through what how we're doing in Tauranga, some of our KPIs, look at the new strategy that we put together last year, and just discuss our forward works plan. That picture there is the consequences of the inflow and infiltration. I won't talk about how we deal with what's coming out. I'm trying to avoid it going in to start with. So what is inflow and infiltration? The flows in the wastewater pipes consist of three sources mainly. One of them is the dry weather flow. The dry weather flow in those diagrams is indicated with the brown bit at the bottom. That is either residential or approved authorized commercial discharges. The other aspect is rainfall derived inflow and infiltration. So that's anything that's derived through rainfall. It could include water coming in through gully traps, through cracks in the network, whether that's through private laterals or the public network. And the other aspect is we can get groundwater infiltration as well. That's where our network gets submerged as the groundwater table rises. The network gets submerged, and once again we'll get water coming in through the cracks in the network. Almost all of our gravity networks receive some sort of inflow and infiltration. It's just the quantity of this depends on the age, the construction materials, and really the quality of the network itself. Consequences of the inflow and infiltration will be obviously reduced capacity, increased OPEX because we've got to pump all that extra water. We can wash out the treatment processes, which are biologically activated, which is all the brown stuff at the bottom. We don't want to dilute it too much. And also, if we have too much inflow and infiltration, we have to spend additional money on additional infrastructure to convey and treat it. So as I mentioned, some of the sources are both on the public and the private networks. What we find is it's very often a sort of a 50-50 split where it's coming from. Where it's coming from our faults on our public network, be that manhole infiltration, manhole defects, or pipe cracks. But also a lot of it comes in from the private networks through the gully traps or the private laterals from the house to our public network that are cracked and damaged that need some repaired. When we're looking for it, what we do try and look for is those spikes in our flows. That graph there shows a time bound on the bottom. We get some rainfall as shown in the top graph. That rainfall displays as a peak in flow, the total flow shown there on those graphs. And then what we've got to do is actually work out how much of those peaks are actually inflow versus just the normal dry weather flows. There's a lot of uncertainty around that, and we spend a lot of time and effort trying to get that information correct. So how are we doing? Modelling, our theoretical modelling suggests that our average is about 1.2% INI factor. The range is from about 0.3 to 2.5%. Many other cities and towns in New Zealand sort of have typically sort of 5 to 10%. So overall, we're doing reasonably well. The figure that we have for inflow infiltration is very dependent on what we call antecedent conditions. That's the environmental conditions at the time. So, for example, if we've got very dry soils and an environment, the runoff seems to be a lot higher. The soil doesn't absorb it, the rainfall as quickly, so we get a lot of runoff. But if we've got a very sort of wet, saturated soil, a lot more of the rainfall gets absorbed in, and so we get the slightly different response. Very often, the worst response is if you're getting a lot of runoff that goes into the gully traps. That's when we get the real big peaks. So that's what we try and sort of manage the most. Those figures there are based on modelling. Our observations support that. There's a New Zealand guide for the management and control of inflow and infiltration, which has some very complex KPIs to measure. We've done a lot of those on our catchments, and all those figures support the theoretical modelling as well. So just a couple more indicators. That's the last 10 years. Apologies, I don't know what happened in the first two in terms of our measurements, but the last 10 years, number of overflows on the right-hand column in the blue graphs, and the rainfall for the year in the red line. And you can see the sort of intuitive correlation between rainfall and inflow and infiltration, with wetter years clearly showing higher levels and dry years easing off. Another KPI, this is now from the last financial year's 2021-22 financial year. Our benchmarking, we do benchmarking annually against councils, and that shows Tauranga in blue there. Our inflow as 0.142 overflows per 10-kilometre of pipes, and you can see that compares very favourably. In fact, we're below the average for any of those categories of councils around the country. I'll move on to some of the activities we've done to date. So we've done a lot of work since 2008 till the last few years, till probably 2020 when COVID hit, and things sort of slowed down a little bit. But we looked at 45 catchment areas. So that was looking at those peaking flows through different catchments. We'd pick up those trends and prioritise the ones that were peaking the most. And we went out and did a lot of investigating through manhole inspections, smoke testing, gully trap inspections, CCTV inspections, as well as flow gauging, where we make smaller catchments within the catchment just to understand where the flows are coming from, to pinpoint us to where the problems might actually be. To give you an indication of what some of those things are that I just spoke about, this is some photos from smoke testing we've done around the city. So what we do is we fill the wastewater network with smoke, and then we inspect the entire public and private network in the catchment area that we're observing. So the photograph on the right-hand side, you can see smoke coming out somebody's garden. So that's clearly their lateral is broken. So you can imagine rainfalls on that and it just goes straight into the network. The photograph on the right shows smoke coming out of a stormwater patch pit or entry. That one, in fact, that's a genuine stormwater downpipe into a genuine stormwater gully. But what happened was, on that particular property, the entire stormwater of the property was connected to the wastewater, and the wastewater was connected to the stormwater. So it's these sort of things that our inspections are sort of picking up. It's not all that common to find those, but there's definitely some of them out there. Then other inspections we do is individual property inspections. The photograph on the right, you can see somebody has diverted their rainfall downpipes from their roofs into their gully traps and wastewater. The two pictures in the middle show gully traps that are at ground level, so water obviously just runs straight into them. And then the picture at the bottom right corner actually is the same one as the one next to it on the left. But after we actually put out a notice to the property owner, asking them just to correct their gully track, we get very good response to that. People are normally very sort of cooperative, trying to assist. And so they've gone and raised their gully track, makes it compliant and reduces the overall impact.
Stuart, I'm presuming you can't do too much apart from finding each of old houses or development where you said that stormwater is connected to the wastewater pipeline and vice versa. To avoid that from here on in, I mean, is every new build inspected like that? Well, given like a certificate of compliance that it's not hooked up, mixed up from here on in with all new builds, or and I'm talking about every new house that's going up and making sure that that system is not overflowing into the stormwater and that.
Yeah, so those are all inspected, but through our strategy, which I'll explain later, we actually want to work with our building services team to see if we can improve those. That is actually all part of our proactive work to actually try and improve some of those inspections. So those are the exact sort of things that we're starting to look at more. So the next one is we do a lot of CCTV inspection. So this is we drive a camera up the pipes, an automated camera, and a lot of the inspection is done through our asset management team. They've got a whole program of condition assessment. So we link into that, but we also look at some of our priority areas and put CCTV inspections for infiltration into that overall CCTV inspection program. The photograph on the right is quite a bad example, which I don't think is actually from our network. But certainly the two in the middle, they're from our network, and they're probably more typical of what you'd see is sort of damage to the public network and leakage. And then with a growing city like we have, a lot of the services are done with underground directional drilling. So it's not uncommon for us to find services have been drilled through our wastewater pipes, which we once again have to correct. So our INI strategy was rewritten in 2022, so that was last year, to provide a more of a proactive focus. Previously, we were quite reactive. We would sort of find problems and then sort of try and reactively address them with inspections. But the new strategy aims to be a bit more proactive and look at the root causes of some of these problems so we can eliminate them at the time of happening. An example would have been the building inspections. So a lot of the focus of the new strategy is around being a bit more proactive in the program. And the reason for that is our INI is generally quite low. So what we're aiming to try and do is to maintain that. The New Zealand guidelines, the level of inflow and infiltration we have is below the sort of economic threshold to really jump into it in a major way. But what we're trying to do is be really proactive and actually maintain where we are, because we know our network is aging and deteriorating as time goes on. So the new strategy is a lot of strategy. It's got pillars, and the first one of those is about prevention. One of the ones that we're looking to do is to look at the infrastructure development code. So that's the code that all infrastructure around cities is developed to. It's the specifications, quality codes, approved materials. So we're working to improve our processes, working with the asset services team who administer that IDC, as well as our operations networks teams to make improvements as we see fit. And those, once we identify problems with particular materials, we'll try and get them changed in the IDC so we don't actually have them in the future. We're looking to improve the monitoring of development approvals and implement improvements for inspections where appropriate. So this is where we'll work with the regulatory compliance building inspection teams. We'll look to monitor the quality control processes through our capital works delivery. So that's both the public works, capital works, as well as the private, which is the developers works, through our development engineering teams. So we work with our development engineering teams quite closely just to make sure that they do the sufficient checks prior to actually accepting the infrastructure across to ourselves. The next pillar is around issues identification. So that really focuses on trying to work out which of the priority areas that we need to spend money on doing investigations for. So we look through with the network model. That's a well advanced model now and calibrated. So it provides us good insights into where there might be some inflow and infiltration to investigate. We look at all our data. We've got huge amounts of operational data coming in. All those spikes that I showed you in the graph at the beginning, they're in there. They're all at our pump stations. So we can monitor all 150 pump stations, 170 I think we have. Try and look up those to try and prioritize. The next pillar would be our implementation programs. So the idea is to actually develop up a number of programs that focuses on rehabilitation of both the public and the private networks. So the public network is easy. We've got access to that. We can do it. On the private network at the moment, we rely very much on letters out to property owners. And we probably need to improve our ability to work on probably more expensive aspects of that, which might be renewing laterals. If we had to renew all the laterals, it's quite a lot of money to do that. So for certain households, it might be an expensive exercise. So we need to work through how we actually achieve those improvements. And then the final pillar of the strategy will be the review. So we've implemented a plan to annually review the performance of the I&I of the network, and as well as a 3-yearly program to look at the effectiveness of the program over the 3 years and tweak it in line with where we need to go, but in preparation for LTP. So we've aligned those overall 3-yearly review programs with the LTP cycles, as well as with some model build cycles.
Could you go back to the implementation? Just a comment for the prioritised repairs and renewals. I think overall the full council strategy of engagement with the ratepayers would be a critical component of that. You know, like generally the engagement by council with the ratepayers, so you can virtually knock on their door and say, "Can we check your pipes?" You know, at the moment you'll be getting it from one will go away and the other one's fuel. Hey, you know what I mean? So
yes, so sorry, just on that one, there is actually a note here which I didn't actually mention in the prevention aspect. Is actually education and information. So that is engaging with the public on a broader scale about what I&I is, so that they can maybe do some self-inspections.
yeah,
But also we've sort of got initiatives to actually work through the likes of the plumbers and gas fitters or drain loads associations. So work through the plumbers. You often see some of these things on the private networks as well. So we've sort of made some contacts with those organisations as well. We want to try and sort of foster some of those working together with them.
Yeah.
So the strategy was put together last year. So this year we have done a combined overall review and setting the way forward. And a lot of that report was around pulling together the last 12 years of information into a single graphical interface database using a GI system. So all that work is now being collated into the database and gives us a much better overview of how we're doing, what we've done, and the ability to assess those catchments a bit better through our modelling process as well. What we also did was put together a methodology to prioritise our catchments a bit better. In the past, as I said, we were just looking mainly at where the peaks are, but we've got a whole bunch more indicators now that are going into that prioritisation process through the SCADA analysis, the looking at overflows that we've had, looking at the modelling as well. Out of that has come a list of prioritised catchments for further assessment, as well as a list of business process improvements to implement. So the catchments that we're going to be looking at in the next 2 years will be the Ngātai Road catchment. That's the purple one on the left-hand side there. That's one that keeps on giving. We've done quite a lot of work in that catchment to date already, but it's proving quite difficult to get to the bottom of it. Very often this is the case with I&I. You sort of almost looking for a needle in the haystack sometimes. So we've got a bit more work to do in Ngātai Road. We'll be doing some work over at the Mount Industrial area. That's an area that's also been identified for network upgrades through the LTP. So we'll be working closely with our planning team for us to look at the I&I aspects of that as well. As they're looking to upgrade the size of the mains, we'll look at how we can manage the I&I to actually optimise that capital spend on that program. The next one is Titoki Place. It's the green one in the middle around Bayfair. Once again, we'll just do some gauging there and some property inspections. We've got a small catchment at Mangatawa Lane that we identified some problems with. It's quite a small catchment, so we'll be doing some additional work out there. At Ashley Place in Tuckmile, once again, just identified some work with flow and property inspections to be done, and then same at Anchorage Grove and Anchorage Grove along the top of business process improvements that we're going to sort of identify. As I mentioned, some of the previous ones, but there is quite a lot of data accumulation that we need to do as well. Make sure we actually accumulate the data as we're collecting it. In the past, to be fair, we haven't collated all that data very well. These programs tend to be quite long rolling programs. We tend to do work beforehand to measure what we've got, and then do some work, and then you might get a dry spell, so you don't get any rain, so you've got to wait till the rain comes to actually assess whether you achieved what you wanted to. So it's quite a long rolling process, which we do need to get better with. So that's why we're putting these databases in place as well. And then the final aspect of any sort of plan is the budgets. So that's the budget that we've allocated. You'll notice the first few years are a little bit lighter than the previous or the subsequent ones. So overall, there's about $5.25 million of work there, starting off in the first 3 years with quite a lot of assessment work, and expecting that we will be ramping up investments in capital improvements as the program evolves. And then in this year's financial budget, we have some budget available to engage with the program manager just to try and get some momentum to this as well. And that's our program. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any further questions.
No, thanks, Brian. Any further questions in terms of Brian?
Just to engineer, that was very informative for me. I managed to follow everything there, so thank you very much. There's a lot of detail, and hopefully it will improve our network and eventually restore our environment. So, sure.
Brian, is there and you outlined earlier on the presentation in terms of by comparison with other cities and towns, we have quite a low infiltration rate. Is there any particular reduction target in mind, given the investment over, say, the next 10 years that you've outlined?
So as I mentioned, the main objective of our strategy is to maintain what we've got. And that will link into containment standards, which at the moment I think is 1 and 2 year storms, that we're trying to manage the system to contain a 1 and 2 year storm. In terms of an absolute target for I&I percentage, we haven't got one specifically. It sort of ranges. And I think if you've got to be careful not to just set yourself a target, because you could be investing a lot of money to achieve a target, which is actually not really causing you a major problem. If you're not getting the overflows and you don't need to spend $5 million to save $5,000 of pumping costs, well, then you wouldn't want to spend $5 million sort of thing. So that's why we haven't been putting specific generic I&I targets. But we will look at, for example, we look at the New Zealand guideline. It's got guidelines as to when you should get involved. And typically that's at about the 5% level and above. So anything below that is reasonably good for us. So that's what we're trying to maintain. I don't know if that's the answer.
Just before you said that, I was going to say 0. But I understand what you just said here, Bruce. Okay.
No further questions or comments?
Yeah, just wanted to say thank you for the report. It was it's great to see that we are on top of the infiltration and keep up the good work. And in terms of the earlier report on the activity, that was a pretty positive report as well, notwithstanding we've had some blockages, but overall the report is on track. So well done to the team. Thank you.
I take it, Stephen, you're therefore quite happy to move receipt of the Wastewater Management Review Committee report.
I am. I'm happy to move that.
Okay, seconded by Billy. Nothing further, I'll put that. All those in favour? It's
Aye.
carried. And again, thanks very much, Brian. Very much. So we'll move to the last report on our agenda. That is on page 100. And the use of treated wastewater for street tree and garden irrigation. Jim?
Oh, hello again, everyone. So before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the work of Bradley Cairns, the States and Workers team, and Hannah Sherritt, who helped put the report together. So I'm just going to run you through a breakdown of the report, just in the presentation. I've just got some photos. Just to provide more context. Any questions, just interrupt me. I'm happy to answer as I go. So to start with, I guess you're all aware that the climate change is upon us. You know, we're experiencing quite a few different weather events. So just included these photos on there, which I thought was quite appropriate. So this shows the Auckland floods that happened in 2023. The bottom left is what I took from NIWA's website. So this was the very dry summer we had in 2014. Oh, sorry, 2015. So yeah, the climate is becoming a lot more variable. So TCC were committed to maintaining and enhancing the health of our source water streams. So these are from NIWA's website. So you can see that the seasonal outlook for October to December 2023. So in terms of rainfall, we can see that it's going to be, it's going to be quite low. Looking at the temperature as well, it's going to be forecast to be quite a hot summer as well. So we're going to have little rainfall with potentially increased temperatures. Also, in terms of like the soil moisture, so again, this is taken from NIWA's website, so it shows the predictions for October to December this year. So soil moisture levels got quite a high probability that it's going to be quite dry this year. So this is a prediction for October to December, but given the current climatic conditions, it's anticipated to continue into summer months. So as you currently know, Tauranga wastewater system, so currently we discharge via an outfall that's 950 metres offshore. Any part of the reconsent of the network or the discharge is through the programme business case, and part of the alternative options that we're looking at for disposal would be potentially the reuse of treated wastewater. The use of treated wastewater is quite commonly used in arid and semi-arid parts of the world to address water shortage. In parts of New Zealand, also used. Historically, in the past, we've also used irrigated wastewater and a minor golf course. Coming back to what TCC do, so we introduced the Water Watchers plan, which is part of a citywide plan to manage and protect water all year round. The Water Watchers plan is focused on establishing good water practices, whether or not it's in drought conditions or wet weather. We all have to adapt our habits and use water more sustainably going into the future. So here I've just highlighted from our website just the Water Watchers plan. So again, just to reiterate, it does restrict the use of sprinklers, water blasters, filling pools, specific parts of the day. So the aim is to have a plan in place before we meet those before those demands occur. So currently, for the Space and Places team, any water use that falls outside of the standard approvals need a smart water plan. So for watering street trees and gardening, the Space and Places team are required to submit a smart water plan during the month of December to March for watering these facilities. Currently, bore water is used for a great sports field. However, just to highlight, these are all the minimum requirements. So where we plant new trees, it can take quite a long time to establish. Puts the trees under quite a bit of stress, and it just takes a lot longer to establish because of the restrictions that are getting put in place due to the water plans. And the environment strategy and the nature and the biodiversity action plan will see a need for more street trees to be planted across the city. These trees will support climate change mitigation, provide amenity, and ensure council meets targets for increased tree capacity and indigenous vegetation. However, this will increase the demand for water, like we said, until the plantings have reach a certain level of maturity. I'm just going to look at some case studies now. So Kinloch is in Taupo, New Zealand. So there's an 18-hole golf course there, and nearby there's the Kinloch wastewater treatment plant. And what they do there is they use the pump and treat wastewater from the plant to the golf course and irrigate the fields that way. So currently it's about 5 hectares of fairways. This method that they use is a subsurface drip system. So I've just highlighted this on the right here. So it's installed in the first 200 to 300 mil where you get that root zone and irrigated that way. The whole process is authorised by a consent. The golf course has been operating this for a fair number of years, and from discussions that we've had with Taupo, with the golf course, and Taupo Council, it's widely regarded as being successful. Radley is currently touring the wastewater treatment plants in the USA, and they found this really cool example in Brentwood, California. So this shows you a picture on the right here showing an automatic fill station. So the residents of Brentwood can go and sign up fill out an application form, get an access card, and rock up to one of these fill stations 24/7 and just take as much irrigated water as I like. There's only a requirement, it's more of a weight requirement for vehicles, I believe. So that's quite a good system. I looked on the website and I pulled this off. This is a one-time application form that they fill in. It lists a lot of requirements on there of what you can and can't do with it. Some of them fairly obvious. So once they fill this in, they receive an an access card, and they can go and have as much water as they like. Yeah. That's quite a cool system. Coming back to TCC, we do have an irrigation consent for treated wastewater. So this was authorised October 2005. In the consent, it lists a number of locations where we can use this, which I've just highlighted on the right. We used to use this on a minor golf course, and I believe it was stopped due to an odour issues being detected during the long summer months. So therefore it was discontinued. However, since that was last used, which was 2008, technology has improved quite a lot. So it's quite unlikely that there would be any detectable odour now. But yeah, the consent is still valid. It expires in 2040. But currently we don't use it. So next steps, with the requirement for greenification, this is only ever going to increase. So we would like to explore the use of treated wastewater for irrigation of street trees and gardens. So we're quite keen to investigate a trial using the treated wastewater along newly planted trees along Monganui Road and the Papamoor area. Just highlighted a few of these locations. I'm sure you're familiar with Monganui Road. These I've just taken from Google Images. We've got this is just a very small example of the amount of street trees that there are, which would benefit from the watering. So we do acknowledge this would require significant, like consenting, potentially health and safety, as well as operational reports and reporting back to the committee. So what we'd like is to understand, the potential positives and negatives from the committee, and whether you would support the staff continuing to investigate such a trial. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jim. Certainly from my point of view, I'd like to see the further investigations and the trial, and picking up that commitment that the council have made, both in the additional greening of the city and that commitment in terms of not just in the future, but the planting that's already occurred in terms of street trees and also in parks and reserves. So, but I'll open it up for any other questions or comments. Spencer.
Obviously, I'm not much of a technician when it comes to water and irrigation and the like, so I don't know if I can engage on the actual technical matters, other than to say I am interested in the comment in your report around getting some feedback from tangata whenua and what that looks like. Obviously, I'm the wrong tangata to do that, but I am interested. I'm okay with you progressing the study and the investigation, but I am interested in how getting that feedback and getting that technical feedback from some of our experts going to happen.
Question, Chair.
I don't really have a question, just kind of a comment. I'm kind of interested in, I suppose, we've been talking about our water system over the last couple of years since the commission's been in and thinking about more efficient ways to use our current supply. I mean, we've got just built a $200 million water treatment plant with high quality treated water that would then go in water people's gardens. So yeah, if we can find alternatives to do some of that. I suppose the bit I'm interested in is, you know, over time, what you know, could we interested, I suppose, in terms of quantities that we could take out of the system, and find alternative uses for. And I'd be interested in the tangata whenua feedback, thinking about, you know, is this a land-based kind of treatment system? So if there's appetite for land-based, then this is potentially an alternative, and reduce the amount of water that's actually being discharged out into the water. So, and then over time, you know, how do we kind of grow that while reducing discharge? So, yeah.
Will you come back on that? Can I tack on my other question, which was where would the treated water, wastewater come from? Is it out of the wetland at the moment or somewhere else?
We'll be looking to take it from the end of the pipe, so that's after it's been treated. How that would look, we're not sure. Operationally, you know, we think it's possible. But yeah, we would be taking it from the wetlands. That's not our intent.
So before the wetlands?
After it's been disinfected, yeah.
So the effluent, excuse me, the effluent goes through the wetlands and then gets collected into our full pump station, goes through the UV plant and then out sea. So it'll be after the UV disinfection. And when we did the trials for this back, when this consent was first issued for those 8 sites, we put out a whole lot of trays with one of the professors from Auckland University to measure viruses from the aerosols, and because these were the type sprinklers rather than the little drippers, subsurface drippers. Unfortunately, after UV treatment, we couldn't detect any viruses. So we had to turn the UV off and then get some mug in a raincoat to go out there and get these. I was the mug in the raincoat underneath these sprinklers, getting the samples. So yeah. So Richie, if you've got that commitment, mate, we'll go shopping you. So yes, it can be done. I expect it would be small to start with. Possibly you'll be looking at a water cart type of arrangement. Yeah, rather than putting more pipes all the way through the city. The issue that we did have with the irrigation system last time round was UV disinfection does not have a residual. It's not like chlorine that, so we got growth in the pipes after time, and that's what created some of the odor. Those growths growing within the pipes because there's no residual disinfectant.
From my Chinese perspective, what you're trying to do and achieve there. The only thing I'll say is that need more sites on the Tauranga side here, mostly all on the Mount side. No, that's all I got to say about that, really. But and you're right, Shed, because we've been pushing to the ground, you know, onto the whenua and instead of out to the ocean. So this is a good start, you know.
Chair, I
Stephen.
fully support the comments that have been made and underline Chad's comments. It seems like a great idea to test the process, and I wonder, do we need a recommendation actually to proceed to trial? At the moment, we've just got a recommendation to gauge tangata whenua feedback, but does that require a process, or are we happy to go?
Well, I had got some wording here, Stephen, in terms of item B was to actually for the committee to support the investigation into the reuse of treated wastewater for watering street trees and potentially other locations. And then I took it from the report, you intend to come back to the committee as a result of those investigations before you undertake the trial. Is that correct? Or is the trial part of the investigations?
We can't do a trial without a resource consent. Yeah. So because our site specific. So It'll be investigations first, then consult, come up with some potential trial sites, get consents, and then have a look at what can be done. There's quite a process to go through, I'm afraid.
So.
Okay, given that, I'm happy to support your motion, Chair.
Yeah, B, in terms of support the investigation into the reuse of treated wastewater for watering street trees and potentially other locations, and to report back to the committee in due course on that. Okay.
Kia ora ko Destiny tēnei. Kia ora, Jim. I really liked your presentation. I'm really in for sustainable living and reuse of resources. I would, just from the tangata whenua perspective, I would suggest you maybe sit with the Te Rangapu rōpū as well, just to get a wider thought on that. But I know that while we were doing AOPs and stuff like that, the planting of trees was a big thing for us, and I'm all for the child, and I'm all for the investigation that's about to happen, and I look forward to what that brings us in the future into irrigation of our green spaces. Thank you.
Thanks, Destiny. So I'm happy to move that we receive the report, and then B, in terms of supporting the investigations, and then reporting back in due course.
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Any further discussion on it? I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. So thanks, Jim, and thanks to the team in terms of bringing this matter to us, and we look forward to it and reporting back in due course. When do you think the time frame for the reporting back will be?
I'm not sure on that. I'll have to have a look into it and let you know.
No, commissioners always ask about the time frame.
Yeah.
Wally,
hurry up before they go.
There might be the opportunity to do some lysimeter tests in the meantime, just on site. Put some trees in a contained environment, so if any spillages happen around those trees and say pots, that water goes back into the effluent system, and we'd actually trial different watering rates for trees or something with the effluent on a controlled site. But it wouldn't be natural, but at least we can see how they survive and how they grow compared to other trees around the city or whatever at that time. But that's something we can talk to spaces and places about.
That's what I call thinking on the run, bro.
thanks, Wally. So that completes, we've got no late items, so that completes today's agenda. So thanks everyone for that, and certainly a good discussion at the start around the program business case and the various matters there. So really appreciate the input of everyone this afternoon. And on that note, Jan, if you'd like to close, please.
Just want to acknowledge you all for chairing our meeting this afternoon, and for our committee members and for those that have had to depart early, and to start for the presentations today. I'll just close with a short karakia. E te atua anea nora mātou hutahi nei, atuka nora ngā whakamoemetinga pēpai ki a koe. Tōna mai rā anu rā tō ringa kaha ki rina i a mātou, a te rā ka hutahi anō ka tawhiriuti hi anō rā kātou. Ngai kaupapa, nō rere te atua tēnei mātou nātina ki a koe, kuro ki tōna whakamoe.
Thank you, and the meeting's closed, and we'll see you Monday, Stephen.
Thank you all. See you Monday.
Thanks, Destiny.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Yeah.